how's it going, guys? Today we're going to be looking at factoring. This is kind of an intro to factoring. This lesson will be this week. Before we move into some more difficult factoring, the real reason for this is because in pre-cal you're going to need to know how to factor, and I didn't feel like I did it very much justice in the classroom. So we're going to try it right here, right now, online. Let's give it a shot. Great GCF. That stands for greatest common factor. And this is something you've heard since middle school or before. Greatest common factor, like for example, between 6 and 4, their greatest common factor is 2. It's the most common term that can be evenly divided into both of the other numbers. 6 divided by 2, 4 divided by 2, you get whole numbers each time. So that's what a common factor essentially is. And now we have something like this, where we have an expression with an x in it. And we have to find out what's the common factor between these two terms that we can divide out of the entire expression. Notice that I only have one x, which means that x is not part of my common factor. I can't divide that out because I don't have any x's over on the right side. I see that these are both even numbers, and let's see, let's just take a guess here. 64 and 40, trying to find the greatest common factor. I know that 40 is 8 times 5. 64 is just 8 times 8. And if I think of any more possible terms, let's just use 8. Let's divide that term completely out. So let's divide this whole thing. Let's see, divide both terms by 8, so that way we can pull it out on the outside. There's that 8, and I'm going to put a big parentheses. 64 divided by 8 is 8, and that's 64x, so it'd be 8x. Plus 40 divided by 8, which is just 5. Easy enough example. I'm going through the easy ones first before we get to the more difficult ones. Let's see. Here I have, I got x to the power of 1 and then x to the power of 4. So I know that part of my common factor is going to be x. X is a common factor. Let's see. Let's take these numbers out front and see if we can find a common factor for both of these. 54 is a special number. It can only be obtained with 27 times 2, and also, let's see, 6 times 9? Yeah, 6 times 9. And then negative 60, we can write that as 6 times negative 10. So we can actually take that 6 out of both of these terms. This is now equal to 6x, which is my most common factor between these two terms. And what we need to find out is negative 60x to the 4th divided by 6x. And we also need to figure out the second term, 54x divided by 6x. Okay, so negative 60 divided by 6 is just negative 10, and this will get rid of one of my exponents here. So I have negative 10x cubed. Okay, and then in my next term, these x's will cancel. 54 divided by 6 is just 9, and since there's a plus sign here, it'll be plus 9. So once again, I found that the greatest common factor here is 6x. Okay, one more before we move on to the Delta Math assignments. Let's see. I'm going to leave a place for me to write my greatest common factor over here. And we'll leave that off to the side. What I do know is that part of that greatest common factor is going to be x cubed, because there's 5 of these and there's 3 of these. The greatest number in between both of these terms is 3. So x cubed is part of my GCF. And then we have, once again, the numbers out front. In fact, let's divide out x cubed real quick and take a look at the other numbers. Plus 72. X to the 5th divided by x cubed is x squared. Okay, and now we're left with negative 9 and 72. Okay, negative 9, I can write that as Well, let's start with 72. 72 is just 9 times 8, and negative 9 is just 9 times negative 1. So my GCF also includes a 9 as the other common term. So my GCF in total is 9x cubed. And if I pull all of that out, 9x cubed, okay, negative 9x cubed divided by 9x cubed is just negative 1. Okay, and then 72, x to the 5th, divided by 9x cubed is going to be plus 8x squared. Okay, so this is fully factored. And like I said, once I get to the harder examples, I will show you how to enter these on Delta Math. But essentially, we're just pulling that greatest common factor out. Now for something that we have done in class, factoring a trinomial. Remember, trinomial just means it has 3 terms, 1, 2, 3. And what I want you to remember is the building blocks for the quadratic formula. These 3 parts, A, B, and C, are going to become essential, because to factor, you have to know how to set it up. I know that whenever I factor something, it will look like this in some shape or fashion. I might have a plus 2 here, I might have a minus 1. Either way, I know it's going to look something like this. 2 factors being multiplied together, and they both have an x term. X times x will give me x squared, so that's the starting blocks. Now to find out these other numbers, to find out what these other numbers are, what you need to do is figure out what b is. B is 9 in this case. And we also need to know what c is. C happens to be 20 in this case. Okay, c is 20. So once we know those 2 numbers, we set up 2 operations. 2 operations. If b is equal to 9, I need to find 2 numbers that add up to b, and those same 2 numbers must also multiply to give me c. So they need to add to b and multiply to c. That's really the trick here. Okay, so let's see. 2 numbers that multiply together to give me 20. I can think of 2 off the top of my head. 4 and 5. 4 times 5 is 20, and what do you know? 4 plus 5 is 9. So these will be my 2 numbers, and since it's a positive 4 and a positive 5, we'll plug them in just as so. X plus 4 and x plus 5. So at least for these problems on Delta Math, and by the way, this is problem number 1 on Delta Math, so if you're paying attention, there's a free problem for you. As you're entering these problems, you're going to want to enter it in exactly as you would write it on a piece of paper. So it wants to know what is that factored. We need to type this in exactly. Let's go to Delta Math and see if we can do that. Okay. I have the problem pulled up here, and what I want you to direct your attention towards is the fact that you don't need to know all the keyboard shortcuts. You can just click on this keyword right here, and you can type in exactly the expression that you want. We had x plus 4 times x plus 5. We hit submit answer, yes, and we got it correct. Okay, also on Desmos, if you're unfamiliar with it, if you're unfamiliar with it, you can also show solutions, and there's also helpful videos that you can also watch by clicking this thing here. Back to the examples. Another problem you might find in your worksheet, in fact, you will find it on your Delta Math assignment, this one right here. Let's just use the same tactics. I want to find out what B is and what C is. That's the first 2 steps. B in this case is -2, and C is -8. I need 2 numbers that add up to B and multiply together to give me C, and they have to be the same 2 numbers. So we got -2 for B and then -8 for C. So let's see, what are our options? Numbers that multiply together to give me -8. Let's see, I could use positive 4 and negative 2, but if I add those together, I'll get positive 2, so that won't work. Let's swap the negatives around. Negative 4, positive 2. Let's test that out. Negative 4 times 2 is negative 8. Negative 4 plus 2 is negative 2. So we're going to use negative 4 and 2. Once again, set up my factors just like before. I have two x's here. We just found the numbers that we need to plug in, negative 4, and then we also need to plug in this 2 into the other factor. Minus 4 plus 2. And this would be the answer you plugged into delta math. Okay. Moving on to solving a trinomial by factoring. Notice that this is an equation. This is problem number 3 from delta math. This is an equation that we need to solve. It's not going to take many more steps than just factoring it by itself. The very first step to all of these is to set it equal to 0. And I said that a million times during our quadratic units, but that's really the first step. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to subtract a 6 from both sides. To get rid of that 6 on the right, we get x squared plus 4x plus 1 is equal to 0. Oops. If I add 1 minus 6, I get negative 5, excuse me. Okay, so yeah, I just combined that negative 6 and that positive 1. Perfect. Okay. Next, you find out b and c. It's just like the last problem we did at this point. b is 4, c is negative 5. Two numbers add up to 4, and they need to multiply together to negative 5. Problems like these can be a little bit tricky when you think about it, but luckily it's not too bad because we're allowed to multiply by things like 1. For example, negative 5, you can write that as negative 5 times 1. And then if we, well, let's see, negative 5 plus 1 would give me negative 4, so let's swap those around. Let's do positive 5 and negative 1. There we go. So 5 minus 1 is 4, and 5 times negative 1 is negative 5. So we're going to use 5 and negative 1 in my factors. It's still an equation, so I'm still leaving it equal to 0. But I do have my two factors now. Both x's there. I have plus 5 and then minus 1. Okay, to solve this equation, all you have to do is consider two cases. Case number 1, the left factor equals 0. And then case number 2, the right factor equals 0. In both cases, this is a really simple Algebra 1 problem. It gives us two different answers. X plus 5 equals 0. If I subtract 5 from both sides, I get x equals negative 5. And then if I add 1 to both sides of this problem down here, I'll get x equals 1. And you can enter that in as an ordered pair on delta math as your two solutions to that quadratic. Let's do one more. And once again, these last 4 problems, including the one I'm about to go over, are on delta math. So if you want a free problem, hopefully you're paying attention. Okay. Step 1, set it equal to 0. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to add 14x to both sides. And I'm also going to add 9 to both sides. I get x squared plus 14x. 31 plus 9 is 40. And the point of that was to cancel everything on the right so that way it could be set equal to 0. We got b is 14. Remember, I need two numbers to add up to 14. I got c is 40. And I need those same two numbers to multiply together to give me 40. Luckily, this one seems pretty simple. If I add 10 plus 4, it'll give me 14. 10 times 4 will give me 40. So x plus 10 and x plus 4 will be my factors. Still set it equal to 0. Case number 1, x plus 10 equals 0. And case number 2, x plus 4 is equal to 0, which produce two results. And if you memorize this by just switching the signs of your factors up here, that's fine by me, because essentially that's what happens at the end. You get x equals negative 10, and then you get x equals negative 4 as your two answers. Okay. Hopefully this video was helpful. If you could take anything away from this to use on your Delta Math assignment, well, one, it'd be the problems I gave you for free, but two, it would be this fact right here about factoring. Two numbers that add up to b and multiply to c. So let's see, I'll get a nice summary on this page. Bx plus c, let's see, two numbers need to add up to b, and they need to multiply together to c. Okay, so those are the two factors that you want. And that's really the whole process of getting there. Other than that, I hope you guys have a good day. Do your best. Keep learning. Have an open mind. And take it easy.